Governance. Thank you, Silvia.
So, they do it
yes.
for me?
We're getting help.
We turn the light down when on.
Can I move it from here or
There is, you can have this one if you like. Let's see, this one. And then, sorry. Like that.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to participate in this IMBIZO. It's my first time, and I am very excited about this interaction, and I am pretty sure we're going to get very interesting outputs out of this. My talk is going to concentrate on issues related to risk, uncertainty, and cooperation. And this is based mainly on small-scale fisheries. I try to put together some case studies from the work I've been doing in the last 5-6 years, and I'm going to use that as an experience to share some learning. As we all know, the marine ecosystems have been exposed to many stressors, and those stressors have an impact on the resources, the availability of the resources, and of course that brings to the activities and the services that they provide to the people. So that there is always a cost involved in these stressors. And the point with this context is how people deal with those stressors and how we can face those challenges and who participates, who makes decisions, how we go about that, and how to define priorities. This is not an easy task, and it's not one solution. So that brings us to issues of governance. And I don't want to present here a concept. I use some keywords that I got from literature that I think is important to bring here. When we have to make decisions, they have to be timely, but also they have to involve all the stakeholders that get a benefit or also bear a cost of those decisions. So the decisions have to be inclusive and get a balanced power. Also, the actions have to be effective and efficient. And we need to identify tools that work under different contexts, because sometimes something might work in one context, but not in other contexts. And if we found something that can be good, maybe we can go beyond and look for ways to use that as a way to increase capacity. In this context, public needs to make good provisions. The government have to make decisions too, but they have to be respectful and then have to articulate common interests. And especially in the context of uncertainty, we need to be adaptive, because the stresses are going to be there all the time and going to be increasing through time. So governance needs to be adaptive. That brings us to fisheries governance. In this case, I'm going to use as a base the whole change, because we don't concentrate only in one component of the fisheries system. There are different components from the pre-harvest to the post-harvest, and that involves also to make decisions in every one of these components. But the factors that define those decisions can vary through time and also in spatial scales. So that depends a lot on resources abundance and also availability, because there could be some things that change, thus access to the resources and regulations, interactions among different sectors. Now we can't talk about problems in fisheries only related to fisheries. There are other sectors that have some connection and interactions. Market demand is very important. I always say that we cannot regulate fisheries only based on knowing the resources, but we need to know the markets. We need to know the users. And also, environmental conditions are changing so fast that they have an impact on the resources and, of course, on the users. So fisheries are dynamic, complex, and highly exposed to uncertainty. And that uncertainty creates vulnerability. And the level of vulnerability can be different according to the exposure, to the susceptibility of the system or the component of the system of the fisheries. And, of course, that will define the adaptive capacity of each one within this context. What I'm going to share with you is some experiences from some case studies, and I had the opportunity to work in more or less a little bit on some of these components, either on the pre-harvest or the post-harvest process. The cases I am presenting are based one, the first one on vulnerability and coping strategies, the second one on cooperation, and the third one on risk perception and safety. I have done this work at the southeast of Mexico, mainly in the Yucatan Peninsula. I don't know if he has a pointer. Oh, yeah. Yes, mainly in this area. And when I was putting together this talk, I was trying to get like a main issue or main questions to address based on these case studies. So what I wanted to share with you all is this learning process about what are the main factors that can put some stress or create some vulnerability in the people. And also how they deal with that, what kind of strategies they develop under contingency conditions. And finally, if we can find ways from this learning process of how to increase capacity and promote this within the context of governance. So going into the first case, like in many Caribbean areas, we are highly exposed to storms, hurricanes. In fact, I was escaping one when I was in my way here. We have, this is the first one, is example of Wilma in our area. And this is example of the red tide. This is very common in the Yucatan region. And it's increasing the frequency and the extension of time that we get the red tides. In both cases, the activity gets stopped. There's problems with the assets, in this case of the hurricanes. But you can see as an example, this is a small boat, so you can have an idea of the extension of the red tides. And we have a group of people working on oceanography and also on the tracking of this red tide. This is a historical trend. And you can see how it varies, but the extension can be increasing through time. Something that happens also after a red tide pass is that the market is affected. People are not willing to buy the product. So there's not only that once they get stopped the activity, they also get problems to sell their product, even the red tide is gone. So what we did was working with two communities to interview people about what factors made them feel vulnerable and how they deal with that. So we targeted three types of groups: those that are integrated in fishing cooperatives, those that have a plan, processing plan, they sell the products, so they have a bigger capacity, and a group that we define locally as free fishers. The free fishers are the people that have mainly one little boat and then can go and sell their product to the cooperative or the firm owners. The hypothesis here is that the free fishers could be the more vulnerable group. So we had some participant observation in there, and we gathered some statistical information from the logbooks of the cooperatives and government agencies. I'm going to present just a few of the results here and a summary of them. When we ask people about the main factors that can be impacted or how they feel the impact of those stressors, in particular, this is the case of hurricanes. So the main impact they felt was in their assets, housing and boats, and of course in their income, because they cannot fish. After the contingency, they have to bear some contingency costs to recover, either to get a boat. They always expect government aid, but some of the groups, like those in San Felipe, they always act very fast. They are very active and trying to solve their own problems. You can see here small differences, but these higher proportion in the firm owners and cooperative in comparison with the free fisheries, because of course the free fishers don't have many assets to lose. We found two kinds of strategies that fishers develop under these conditions: the proactive strategies and the reactive strategies. Among the reactive strategy, we have they look for alternative activities where they don't have to invest, either going as a work construction or getting hired by somebody. They also borrow money or they reduce their expenses. Interestingly, the firm owners, they consider a reactive strategy. They lend money to others. because they expect people to recover fast so they can sell the product to them. So for them, it's important recovery. In the case of proactive strategies, we have less, and mainly is saving or having a complementary activity. Like in communities like San Felipe and Dzilam Bravo, especially, they have some of the firm owners also have some ranches or some stores, and that is like a buffer, a backup for them. They also said, again, when they responded, they said lending money was a proactive strategy because they expect to recover fast to get into business soon. So it's a commitment. When they lend money to the fishing cooperative or the free fishers, they expect to get the products to sell to them so they can be the main sellers of the product. Just a summary of the results of this project, we found that there were more reactive strategies and proactive strategies in place. The free fishers were the more vulnerable group because they have less resources, less alternatives. There is a trade relationship that is very important, this one I was talking about with the firm owners. And we saw that those fishers that work in cooperations have a sense of backup being a part of an organization because they can get some money from there. There were some cooperative actions among the groups in both communities, but especially in San Felipe. People cooperate mainly with relatives and friends, and it was very important to have an alternative livelihood under the contingency situation until the recovery and going back to fisheries. Getting into the second case, since I was working on my PhD also in one of these communities, I found out, looking at the logbooks on daily data of catch, that fishers cooperate. Some fishers go in different boats, but when they arrive to the deck, they pull together the catch and they share the money, regardless who brought more. When we asked why they do that, they said that that was done mainly during the windy season, because they want to be sure to have at least an average income during the bad season periods. I wanted to know if this process was still going on, so we collected data from 4 fishing seasons more recently. And we found that even some of the groups remain. This Polluelo and Tigrillo, there are 2 groups of fishermen that are still working in cooperation and in the same team. They remain together. Sometimes the team change. But in this case, they said that the reason they cooperate is they cooperate mainly in the period where it's the close season of the main target, that is lobster and octopus. So we gather from here that the reasons for cooperation in this case, it was a risk-averse attitude. That means that they wanted to have at least some secure income from average catch. Here are some of the results when we have the benefits that they get when working in cooperation. The average they can get from $40 to $60 a trip when they work in cooperation compared with those that don't work in cooperation. You can see here, this is the period of the windy season, but also the period of the close season of the main targets, and you see more operation of the teams. Another way of cooperation that we found in the same community was what we define like community cooperation. So widows or single moms get products from the fishermen, but also kids arrive to the deck and they help cleaning the fish and taking the fish to the cooperative, and they get fish for that. So these people are called locally like seagulls. And the seagulls get between 1 to 2 kilos per fisherman, and they also cooperate. Some of the seagulls get together, put together all the products they get, and they share the money. Sometimes they are siblings. So we find cooperation between fisher to seagull and seagull to seagull. We had access to the logbooks of the cooperative and all the plants where they go and sell the product. And we found that almost close to 2% of the total catch in the community, it goes to the seagulls, which I think is not a minor issue. They get grouper, octopus, never lobster, but they get sea cucumber, which is a very valuable resource. Something that we found also very interesting is that they got already a middleman, the seagulls. So there is a young guy that used to be a seagull that goes to rural communities, and they get kids and bring them to the coast. It's about 15 kilometers from there. And he buys the product from them and sells it in Merida, where he can get more money. So in a way, it's another way of cooperation within the community. So here's how much they can get in one day, collecting fish on the deck. This peak is because this is the season of the sea cucumber, and the sea cucumber has a very high value. When we ask people why, the fishers, why they give fish to the kids or the single moms or the singles, they have several responses. One of these is just we want to have kids. Sometimes the parents are drunk or irresponsible, and that way we have the family. When they also said that they help kids from rural communities because when they get a hurricane hit, they go and look for shelter in the rural communities nearby. And sometimes it's just because we are part of this community and we need to help. So there was a very important sense of community and cooperation in this context. Sadly, this has been changing in the last five years, and that is for what we call the gold rush for the sea cucumber fishery. This fishery has created a lot of problems in that community and many other communities around, especially in that community because the main banks of the sea cucumber are just in front of their community. So many people came from other communities and even from other states to fish sea cucumber there. So now the seagulls cannot get much like they used to do before, but also there are some illegal fishing in the area. So the exploration of the sea cucumber fishery started in 2010, and officially the commercial fishery got opened in 2012. But they started to fish a lot since this period. This fishery can provide jobs to many people. From the divers, those that remove the guts are mainly women, kids, the transportation, and also the boat keeper is the one that has the hose for the diver, and the cooks. Here is a small group of cooks, but the cooks and the divers can earn almost the same. And that's important because the price of the sea cucumber varies if it's fresh or cooked. It can go 10 times above if it's cooked. They cook in this kind of system. They put salt once they remove the guts. But the problem also is that there's a lot of illegal fishing and then illegal cooking and illegal trade. Sometimes they hide among the mangrove to do this cooking. And once they finish, they drop the hot water with salt, and then it's affecting also the mangrove area. What this fishery brought was newcomers. We don't know how many. We don't know the number of divers. And also, some of these divers lack experience diving. So there's a lot of accidents and death people, too. There is an increase in illegal fishing, illegal marketing, and, of course, corruption at all levels. There is having money there is increasing addictions, more cantinas, more drugs. It's a whole paradise for dealers. So what happened is having a very cohesive community was changed for the incentive of very valuable resource. There are a lot of Chinese that come at the beginning of the season, and they give money in advance to secure the product. So we have two sides in this coin. In one side, in this community, we can see this individual cooperation. It has a risk attitude. And then also the cooperation with the community has making provision for the future in the case of getting some support from other communities. But we also found this market incentive that generated competition and clashes, illegal fishing. And especially the number of accidents have been increasing lately, just incredible. So that brings me to my third case, that is risk perception and safety. We all have a different attitude towards risk, and that can go from risk-averse to risk-prone. And even we can say that I am the kind of risk-averse person, but sometimes under different conditions, you might change. So what may you change depends on your experience, on the conditions, if you feel that you have support to do some things. And that happens to fishermen too. So this is a graph where we present the cases of decompression in the chamber. And you can see that on average you have about 150 cases during one fishing season in the lobster. This is mainly the lobster season. So here we have some of the cases from the sea cucumber. Here this is a sea cucumber case. And I want to stress here that the lobster fishery lasts 8 months. So we have 150 cases in 8 months. But the sea cucumber fishery lasts 1 month. And then we got more cases in 1 month than 8 months. So this is a kind of system that they used for diving, the hookah system. The house that allowed them to move around is 100 meters. So this gives them enough time and space to move around, and they remain a lot of time underwater with all the risks that involve. So we wanted to find out, looking at the fishing strategies of the fishermen, how they can get exposed to the risk of decompression. So we use these computers to track fishers. So in this case, we also selected 3 types of fishermen. We had information, daily catch information from the fishermen. So we identified 3 types of fishers, those from high to low performance. So we were tracking the trips, and then we have both observers and the computers. So we had a monitoring of 1 whole fishing season, so we could look at the diving behavior. The computer collects data on time, diving time, depth, temperature, and the speed of ascent. So this is the pattern we observe when they go for lobster, and this is the pattern we observe when they go for sea cucumber. We call this the yo-yo. They go up and down, up and down. So that can put them into the risk of decompression because they use a hook to get the lobster out of the refuge. Sometimes they lose the hook and they have to go up to get another hook. In the case of sea cucumber, they have a sack, they put everything there, and then they find some banks, and then until they get everything, they go up. So it's very interesting because we found that at the end of the season of the lobster, they cannot find more lobster, so they go deeper and they remain longer to get the lobster. But also, in the case of the sea cucumber, if they get a lot, they stay there until they clean the seafloor. This is the graph we got from the tracking of the dives. Every dot is a dive. And then we have depth and diving time. So all the cases that are above the line are on the risk of decompression. So we found that 24% of the cases were at risk of decompression. And also they go above the average recommended speed to go of ascent. So those conditions put them into the risk of decompression. We only track a limited number of fishers, so we don't know if you extrapolate to the whole community, we don't know how this can be. Another source of risk that we found with the use of the compressor is the pollution with carbon monoxide. So the system works like in a way that the gas that comes out of the system can go in again, and then it gets inhaled by the diver. And we measured the levels of carbon monoxide here in 9 compressors, and we found that all of them are above the limits of the standard organizations. So they are totally exposed to the risk. They use sanitary napkins and sometimes carbon, but it doesn't work at all. We also tested that. So working with people from UCLA and the support some experts, we did some intervention here. What we did was to modify the compressor systems to avoid the inhale of the carbon monoxide. So we had some meetings with them. We also, the university donated some oxygen tanks to take the divers to the chamber of decompression in the process if that was an accident. And we have some measurements, and we placed some of these posters in the community. So the results show that with the implementation of this adaptation, so it's just putting these tubes that take the gas up, so that way it doesn't get back into the system and get inhaled. So 80% of the reduction of the carbon monoxide was there. So that made a big difference for them. This is a very extraordinary case. This guy was all time with rashes. He said he was common for him, and it was the carbon monoxide. And sometimes the symptoms are very similar for decompression and the carbon monoxide intoxication. So when they saw this, more people wanted to have the change. So why this was possible to do with them? We have been working for more than 10 years in these communities. So they started to acknowledge the risks. They even didn't know, in the case of the carbon monoxide, the problems. They expected a positive outcome, and they did. So that created a trust, and they allowed them to participate. Now we submitted a proposal to try to implement this in a larger scale, and waiting for the response. So now, with all these 3 cases, bring me to the idea of what makes people cooperate, why cooperation is possible or not. We gather from all this learning process that there has been so much in interest, transparency and mutual trust. Also, there should be common norms and values. In the case of the community altruism, it has a sense of community that makes people to cooperate. Also, the number of factors is important. The larger the group, the more difficult to get an agreement. And sharing information. So people have to see the potential benefit of cooperation. On the other side, having access to the resources in the case of fisheries is very important. People can cooperate, but sometimes, like in the case of the sea cucumber, if that is reduced or the potential benefit for being me, the only one who gets a benefit, change totally from cooperation to competition. And it's very important to have leadership. We found that there's more cooperation in communities where leadership is in place. So something that is important in this process too is the bonding. People have some bonding, but also the binding, bridging with other groups, with NGOs, government agencies, and scientists. So that brings me back to my first point of governance. So we have a very dynamic system, and there are many things going on in this process. There is a cross-scale interaction, so people have to acknowledge risks at all the levels. And in the case of cooperation, there is a need to set common goals and develop adaptive strategies. And it's very important that that will allow to create some adaptive capacity. So it's important to create this bonding and binding to improve governance. And this is a learning process. It's a dynamic process, but learning by doing. We have to acknowledge the need to recognize all these components are in place and the interactive dynamics. So I want to close with these ideas. We cannot eliminate risk. It's going to be there, but we can reduce risk or create mitigation programs. It's necessary to widen this vision of governance and policy interventions. According to the experience we got, we have to find a way to promote more proactive strategies and reactive strategies and build capacity at different levels. We can have healthy environment and healthy ecosystems, but we need to have healthy communities too. So this is necessary to build capacity also at different levels. And it's very important to have educational efforts to create awareness. Sometimes that is not in place. People are going to keep being exposed to stressors. It's a fact, we cannot change that. But then we need to create capacity. We need capacity at all levels, in the community, at government agencies, and also in our case as a scientist. I want to thank the people that work on different teams in these projects and all the support from different agencies, and also thanks to you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. We have some time for questions. If anyone has a question, please.
Yes, sir.
Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia, for your nice presentation. My name is Beatriz Casareto. I am coming from Japan. I am professor at the Shizuoka University and working in biogeochemistry and microbiology. My question is, I have 2 questions. You show your field work around the Yucatan Peninsula, And so I know very well that this area was threatened by huge bleaching events in 20 years ago, since 20 years ago. And so a lot of coral reefs were lost. And if we don't have coral reef, we don't have fishes. The people working in fisheries is aware of these things and how they face these things. This is one question. And the second question is more or less similar. So how the people working in fisheries have aware of the environmental stressors and how they face it. I mean, so there is some education programs for them to understand the problems. And because you talk about the example of the sea cucumber, so they take a lot of sea cucumbers and they are really destroying that.
Yeah, thanks. It's a very interesting question. One of the problems we have with hurricanes is exactly what you said, is affecting the coral reef. And in the Yucatan, we don't have many reefs, but we have these layers of limestone that creates like effect of coral reefs. That is affected because the sun covers, and then the refuges are covered. So what happens either is that the resource moves, like lobster doesn't stay there, but moves. One way that we have been dealing with that, and in fact I participated in that process, was to introduce artificial habitats. There were more than around 4,000 artificial habitats that were placed in that area 2 years after the hurricane, because there was a lot reduction in the productivity. At the beginning, fishermen didn't want to accept that, but when they saw the benefits of the increase in the concentration of the resources now, after 10 years also, they want to get more of these artificial habitats. It's a problem. And I think the problem, like in many contexts, I don't know, at least in Mexico, is that fisheries have been looked mainly for stock assessment. So there is not much beyond that. I remember once I had an interview and I said, fisheries are not just a problem of fisheries. And I referred to the environmental problems we have in that area, porks, a lot of pork farms. And there is a belief that because we have underwater ground, so we don't have lakes or rivers. So that goes to the underground. So we believe that part of this red tide could have something to do with that. Then I said, the problems go beyond fisheries. The headlines was, Dr. Salas said there are not problems in fisheries. So there is not an awareness of what is happening around and how other activities can affect fisheries. So I always insist on rehabilitation of habitats. We need to improve the quality of the environmental conditions. But I think that is just starting with that. That happens in the southeast of Mexico, but not in the other coast. In the Pacific, there is a lot of people working on environmental issues in La Paz and all that. But in the region where I work, it's not. They care about the resource. And in the case of the sea cucumber, even the fishermen are more concerned than the government agencies about the disappearance of the sea cucumber. They know that they filter the sediment. So they know that there is something happening. If we remove the sea cucumber, we are going to have an impact for the whole ecosystem. And even the fishermen know better than the government agencies and some fisheries biologists. They'll say, okay, let's go for just to know how much biomass and then give the tag. That's the problem.
Thank you. I have one more question, and sorry, we'll go with this one. There's plenty of opportunities to ask Silvia more questions throughout the week, but
very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. I'm Jarina from Malaysia. I'm very interested in your part where you were stressing on the fact that fishermen are collaborators. And I'm wondering how it's actually being accepted by the fisheries agencies in Malaysia, because I'm trying to push for the same understanding in Malaysia, because they are cooperating for various reasons, as you mentioned. But how are the fisheries managers reacting to this? Because they still see fishers as nothing but opportunistic hunters. They refuse to see them otherwise. So, but how is it in Mexico?
It varies from region to region. I had the opportunity to work there for long. I remember when I started, they didn't want women to start working in fisheries. So that was the first rejection. But after being stubborn and remaining there, now they accepted me, and then you have to create credibility. I think that's the main point. Once you create credibility, then you can ask for more. You can ask for participation. And I've been always careful to give back my results to them. So that's the first, and also to the government. So the community where we work is a good interaction between government agencies, scientists, and fishers, because they provide some aid to the fishermen. We do the study, and we involve them. But that is not the case in other regions like Veracruz, but it's happening in some communities in La Paz. So it varies. But I still think that we have government agencies that are a bit square in that I am the one who defines the rules. So I think it's also, again, education. We need to educate at all levels and generate trust and credibility.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lady.